Welcome to the fifth part of our webinar series, The Art and Science of Practical Management, Core Skills for Leadership and Management, with Professor Joe Martin tonight. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's tonight is going to talk to us about dealing with the unpleasant expectum patronum. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much. And this evening we're talking about dealing with the unpleasant. And the unpleasant, I'm afraid, is with us. We have quite a few experiences often that are not always good. And this evening I'm going to talk about a bit how to deal with some of that. So we all manage things. We manage stuff at home. We manage stuff at work. We manage ourselves, our daily interactions with others. Sometimes we manage whole departments. Sometimes we manage whole hospitals. But there are those with whom we have to have interactions to go about our daily business. And sometimes those don't go well, or you have an unpleasant interaction. Minimizing those interactions and knowing how to deal with matter. Organizations, all the data shows that organizations that have a positive environment perform much better. People are more open to change, development. It's less stressful, and personal stress is less when you have a degree of control. And that's not necessarily a degree of control over events, but it's also a degree of control over your own reaction to events. So what is unpleasantness? You will all have vivid recollections probably of different events, different times where you've essentially come across something unpleasant. It may be a whole range of different settings, but the common feature is negativity. Unpleasant is also personal. So some people that you might think is unpleasant, it might just be you. Sometimes it isn't. Other people may well notice, but sometimes it's personal to you, or you feel that it is personal to you. So sometimes it can seem like it's subjective rather than objective, but quite often it isn't. Anger is the common one that you will think about. Shouting, aggressive body language, verbal abuse, written attack, passive aggression. Sometimes you can misread signs. I've got a colleague who talks very loud, very, very close to me. And that's not actually anger or aggression. That's just the way they are. That's just the way they communicate. They can come too close, invade your body space. So actually knowing the difference between anger and just a way of communicating can be helpful when you think about it. But that anger, that shouting is never acceptable. That's the other thing. Written attacks, offensive, passive aggressive. All this is part of that anger spectrum. Corrosion, corrosive behaviour, undermining, going round you, going to your boss instead of talking to you about it. People being rude about you, people being negative about things. That's the sort of corrosive type of unpleasantness. Toxicity, incivility. So there was one colleague I had who you would say good morning to and they just walk past you. That was just rude. Personal agenda in a team setting as well. So not going through that can be very toxic. Disruptive behaviour, storming out of meetings, deliberately going off piste to try and disrupt the flow of things. Gossiping can be very toxic, and blaming as well. Irritation, so I've used the irritant chemical symbol here. Niggling, fussiness, pettiness, and unnecessary. Now, picking up on details, absolutely right thing to do, but niggling and pettiness can be a form of unpleasantness also. Life sapping. You'll recognise negative, no energy, draining, the heart sink, can't be bothered. That's the sort of life sapping part of unpleasantness. you know, should we all go for, you know, should we go for a training session, and can't be bothered. That's the sort of undermining, sort of life sapping unpleasantness that can happen. So what can you do? One of the important things when you're faced with unpleasantness is moving from the what's going on to why is it going. Why are they sending grumpy emails? Why are they being rude? You know, why are they just so miserable? Why do they seem as though they're trying to undermine somebody else in the team? And that's important because there's often stuff going on behind the behaviour. It may be that, you know, there's a merger or a move to a different site, and that might be costing people more money. It might be, you know, a simple move. So we at Barts, we've got different sites. Some of them are in zone 1, some of them are in zone 2. It makes a real difference to people's financial status if we move them from one to another. So you have to understand what's going on behind that and do what you can to mitigate it, or at least to recognise it. Some people get very, very unpleasant when they're stressed. Somebody might be stressed at home. Somebody might be stressed by problems at work. So persistent failure to, you know, get patients through the system or bring patients up to a diagnostic arena can get some practitioners really, really cross and really angry, and that will spill over into bad behaviour. So the bad behaviour is triggered by specific things, and similarly with a health problem. One of the other important things is recognising your own reaction. So if somebody behaves badly, either in a public setting or to you in a private setting, how do you react? Some people get really angry, some people get really vicious, and some people just withdraw. And understanding your own reaction in that and thinking through, well, how did I behave in that setting, is important because it can escalate the situation. So emailing while you're angry, fatal. You know, I've got myself into trouble doing that. I was very cross on somebody else's behalf. Somebody was offensive to a colleague. I defended them, and I was a little terse in my response. I wasn't rude, but I was a bit terse, and that's not generally what I would do. And in retrospect, I regretted that. Saying things that you will regret later. So if somebody's unpleasant and you respond in an unprofessional way, or you say something to another colleague, a third party, about how you hate that particular individual and they've always been gruesome and you can't bear them, that's going to come back. So know that you have a tendency to lash out, or knowing that you might have a tendency to lash out is important. And similarly, withdrawing. So if you really, you know, if you're really subject to, I had somebody shout at me and wagging their finger in my face in one meeting, and you just sit back and you just want to go away and crawl into a hole. But recognise that your reaction is to try and do that is actually very helpful as well. And withdrawing is not always helpful. Sometimes moving yourself away from the situation can help, but withdrawing and ignoring is not always helpful long term. This is so important. This is from The Godfather. It's not personal, it's strictly business. 99.9% of these interactions that are horrid, it isn't personal. It's not you. It's the situation, or it's the person being unpleasant. It's not you. And that's really important when you're managing or you're leading. It's evil management. It's, you know, the organization. So often written in Gothic, you know, in mental Gothic letters, management. That's always in Gothic letters with da 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 da. It's not you. And once you start to be able to remember in the heat of this that it's not you. It really helps your own resilience, and it helps you move from a reactive to a sort of diagnostic and more planned way of action. Going formal is always an option. Know your policies, know your procedures. That's really important. So I have implemented investigations into grievances, investigations into others' allegations of bullying and harassment. Document everything, investigate it, be impersonal. It's you investigate events, you deal with them in an impersonal way. You don't judge until you've got the results of the investigation. If it's you making a complaint, please feel free to. Certain behaviours are completely unacceptable. Bullying and harassment is unacceptable. Go to your line manager, go to the procedures. They are your friends in this. And the important thing is when you're managing these things, if somebody makes a complaint, take it seriously, deal with it formally, properly, simply if you can. The person making a complaint or observing or reporting the behaviour may want a simple resolution, or they may want a full formal investigation and disciplinary procedures, but know your policies for both. Your organisation will have those. So, assuming that you don't go formal, I've got some suggestions as just to finish off with ways to deal with some of the common sort of microaggressions that happen during life. So, coping with the unpleasant email. Joe, how can you possibly claim to be completely unaware of this shambles? You're a disgrace, etc., etc., etc. And then they copy in the world and everyone in it. Usually your chief exec, your educational supervisor, rest of your department. So it's just, you know, what do you do then? You respond straight away, having thought it through, and not in an angry way. Acknowledge that they're very passionate about it. Passionate is a good word, not angry, and you know, don't say you are being offensive. You're obviously very passionate. Why don't we meet and see if we can sort it out? I'd appreciate your help. And then copy everyone else in. So it's turning it from a negative to a positive. That can be helpful. That's one example. Again, if it's to you personally and not copying in the whole world, again, thank you for that. You've got a lot of experience. Grateful for thoughts on how we can help sort it out. A lot of the passion, a lot of the sort of anger that you can get in some of these emails is because people feel very strongly about it. They're very passionate about the topic. They're very engaged in it. And sometimes, not always, they will want to help and they'll want to be involved. So have that conversation with them. The other thing is, just occasionally, when you get one to you that is grumpy, just checking in with them can help. And that breaks the cycle. So always think about them as a person, as well as them as a very ranty person at the other end of the email. The other tip I would give you is coping with the heart sink. When you have a colleague who has been unpleasant to you, when you've got a colleague who, or a particular situation, a manager, a colleague, who you just dread that interaction with, you can see them coming along the corridor and you just wince inwardly. I used to have that with the one who wouldn't even say hello to me. How can you deal with that? Do you ignore them? What do you do? Do you just hate them silently? So just a mental tip for me, I use the Expecto patronum. So the Harry Potter, the Dementors that suck your soul out. Harry Potter casts this Expecto patronum spell, which has a sort of white shiny shield around him and it protects him from the soul suckers. Well, just mentally, I never say it out loud. Don't make that mistake. Mentally, I'll just think expecto patronum, and it switches me from a very negative mindset into a slightly inside smiley. It makes me happy to think about that, and that sets me in a different mind frame. So thinking of different tips and tricks that might move you from a negative mindset into a slightly more positive or objective mindset can be helpful. I've got another colleague who I told this to, and she thinks about daffodils, and another one thinks about the place where she was born, and that helps. Just if they've got something that they're finding unpleasant, they just think that, and it just presses the reset. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you.
Thanks very much, Jo. And some really nice, useful tips actually for dealing with those things. I remember when you said to me once about the Expecto patronum. I do think about that myself. It's really good. But thank you for talking about an issue that's really, really important. And I don't think we talk about it enough really in sort of healthcare in general. And I think in times like this, where we're sort of reminded of, well, we're all in very stressful, turbulent times at the moment, getting used to working in different environments. And things like this can make things so much more pressured, particularly if there's some unpleasant behaviour going on at work as well. So it's really, really important to be open about it and try and ensure that that sort of thing is minimised and absolutely eradicated really from the workplace, because we're all in this together really, and all got the same objective. But I'd like to open it up to the audience now for questions. So if you've got any questions for Jo, then please drop them into the Q&A function at the bottom. And we've got some coming through, Jo. So we've got one from Emma. Thank you, Emma. How do you go about fighting resistance and unpleasantness from others when you want to change something?
So go through the steps, work out why you've got resistance and unpleasantness. I've had the same. We're merging two departments onto one site, and some of the resistance and unpleasantness was basically people didn't want to move, people didn't want the additional travel, people didn't like Whitechapel, all sorts of things like that. So trying to understand what's at the basis of it. And the other thing is doing as Matt's just done and illustrated very well, just occasionally reminding people that we're all on the same side, that we're actually there for patients. If you're listening and you're in the health game, which is probably most of us, we are on the same side, and sometimes that will just help, again, just reset the conversation. And I have done that with when we were moving two departments into one situation. You go, well, actually, is there any reason why we couldn't do this? We couldn't have one department. Let's have the separate discussion about where it should be, and then you sort of go around and you surface what's going on underneath it. We're a tribal species sometimes, and trying to break down some of that tribalism sometimes can be helpful. Can be hard work though.
I suppose as well certainly throughout my training and from medical school, there's been quite a hierarchical system that can be present in medicine, and I suppose that can be quite a difficult thing to overcome in certain situations as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jo. So another question: how do you address incidents of bullying when you know that departmental or organisational culture may well leave you unsupported and in a worse situation, despite what policies and procedures say? Is it sometimes easier to ride it out?
So I had been in exactly that situation myself, where I was subject to a complaint, and from somebody who had made many complaints, and I knew that I was not going to be supported in saying, actually, there is no substance to this. This is a malicious malicious complaint. And sometimes when somebody makes a complaint about you because you've raised an issue, that can be, you know, you raise a if you instigate bullying and harassment procedures against someone, sometimes you will find that they'll raise a counterclaim against you, and that's that's another form of unpleasantness. I think you have to if you're a trainee, you'll have access outside the department. If you're an employee, you will have access outside the department. So there are whistleblowing and there are freedom to speak up procedures in most organisations. So you can go to those. There are boards, and there are open trust boards, and there are usually freedom to speak up and whistleblowing people in those. Do take bullying seriously. Document everything. Document the specifics, dates. The more if you just say somebody shouted at you, know, they're always shouting at me. Whereas if you say they shout, you know, on the 4th of October they shouted at me at 9:20 in the morning. This was witnessed by XYZ. Then it's a lot easier to investigate. It's a lot easier to document it. And when you're dealing with difficult things, then actually documenting it is actually very helpful. The other thing is, don't naturally assume that you won't get supported. There, in most departments there will be someone who will support you. And bullying and harassment is not acceptable.
I agree. There's no place for it in any specialty, and one incident is far too many as far as I'm concerned. And I would strongly urge people to talk. I mean, with the college, with the trainee committee, did a campaign last year about this to try and get people talking about it. And I know it's not just our college. There are united fronts across all healthcare organisations to try and get people talking about bullying and harassment, because there's help available for those people that are experiencing it, and we need to stamp it out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks, Charlie. How do you cope with a colleague who tries to undermine you?
Oh, so undermining, yeah. Undermining is actually, so depends how unsubtle it is, really. If it's subtle and you're never quite sure whether they're doing it, depending on the circumstances, if it's an equal, if it's a peer, sometimes you can feed back to them. Because when you when you said that in the meeting, I'm sure you didn't intend it, but I felt as though I felt a little undermined on that. So you don't say you undermined me. You said when you did that, I felt that I felt a bit undermined. Is there anything I can do to help, or deal with that? But you have to feel quite confident in order to do that. So I do acknowledge that, but it can stop it.
How do you think bystanders are in these sort of situations as well, Jo? Do you think they?
So bystander intervention is incredibly helpful. I've seen it done beautifully. Somebody just saying, "Oh, I'm sure they didn't mean that," well, that didn't sound very nice. I'm sure they didn't mean it. And that simple intervention can make such a difference. So I've missed the chance to intervene once, and I bitterly regret it. I was in a meeting and somebody said something offensive, and I was so shocked at the time. It wasn't like, but it was just it was really rude, and I was so shocked. I was chairing the meeting. I was so taken aback that and everyone around the table, the heads went down. And I thought, was it just me? Had I misinterpreted it? And I hadn't. And I wished at the time, in retrospect, I would have dealt with that very differently. I'd have said, actually, okay, I'm going to call the meeting to a halt for a moment. We're going to take a breath and go outside. I felt that was uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable about what's just happened. We're going to stop the meeting for a moment, take a breath of fresh air, and reconvene. And I would have stopped it. I would have stopped it in retrospect. But a bystander saying, actually, oh, that made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Is that what you meant? And that's fair enough, because it's what you feel, and it's not, I can't believe you just said that. It's, that made me feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
I've had a situation with a medical student who actually stood in on my behalf, actually, and it completely changed the dynamic of quite a stressful situation. And again, the power of someone actually saying, actually, I don't think that's quite right, was enough to just confuse something that was becoming very unpleasant. So,
yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Another question: how do you cope with someone who falsely accuses you of shouting? This is a well-known technique in political debate.
He falsely accuses you of shouting. So firstly, I would say not everyone is aware that they raise their voice, and can come across as shouting even when you raising your voice. So my very excitable colleague has been accused of shouting, where she's got no intention of shouting. It's just she gets carried away. So I would ask a few friends, actually, whether you have a tendency to raise your voice. So get some feedback. If it is a purely malicious thing, speak to them. Say, I had no intention of shouting. I apologise if you were concerned that I'd raised my voice. That was not my intention. It's sometimes just apologising for making them feel that way. If they're doing it if they've raised formal proceedings, then again that will be investigated. But sometimes just a 360. Was I a bit over the top in that meeting? And somebody will say, well, yes. But go to your friends to ask, because they will be honest with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thank you. Another question. Dear Joe, do you have any pointers for leading/managing this, where you find yourself clinical lead to a department in which you trained and are therefore dealing with your former trainers?
Just again, be dispassionate. Do it absolutely straight down the line. Again, don't gossip. Don't take sides. Just be as fair as you possibly can. Be open, to be transparent, and people will respect you. People will, if you do the right thing, and don't play games. Don't play games. Just lead with as much integrity as you can muster, and be fair. It's a lot easier. I mean, everybody messes up periodically, but apologize when you need, when you mess up. Ask for the help, and ask for the broad help. Don't have favourites, and don't avoid the ones you would naturally avoid. That's the other one.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Thank you. Another question: any tips for dealing with the passive-aggressive colleague?
Very hard. So the passive-aggressive is some of the most difficult to deal with. Again, getting to the trying to get to the bottom of why they're being like that. Not responding to emails and then coming out in the middle of something and saying, well, I haven't seen anything like this, is a common way of sort of leading into that. No, difficult. Try and understand what's behind it and why. Is helps you deal with it a lot more easily. Sometimes just going and having a chat, having a coffee, and saying, we've got this difficult situation. Have you got any advice?
Yeah.
Help. Yeah.
Asking for that is quite important, and communication with it as well.
Yeah. And in most leadership things, you're not on your own. Sometimes it feels like it, It can feel like it enormously. All alone on Joey Island is not a great place to be. You can ask colleagues. Always, your organisation may well have coaches as well, and that's often a very helpful adjunct to dealing with some of their stuff.
Certainly, I've taken advantage of the college's coaching offer that was very kindly given by Sarah Gornall and some other qualified coaches to the trainees, and it's been fantastic actually. Just, even for just career planning and things like that, it's skills that it's very useful for all different facets of the job.
Yeah.
Not enough. So yeah, strongly urge people looking into that. Another question: how do you deal with a colleague who is always right except they're not, and gets rude and defensive if challenged?
Yeah. So I have one of my offspring who you say no, just say I'm sorry, I was wrong. Can I just say that? No, you can't. Just apologise. It's like, but no, not but. You know, wrong. So if somebody is always right, you know, or feels they are always right, again, it may be just a style thing. They may not wish to lose face. They may be very prideful. And sometimes it's the data, again, that may help. It depends what the circumstances are. They may think that they're always right. Sometimes there are ways that you can encourage them to think differently through the use of data, through the use of discussion, that won't wound the pride too badly. I think face-to-face confrontation on, you know, if you get into a waggy finger, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, that's a negative interaction. So
I've always thought about it as well as kind of maybe there's an underlying insecurity or sort of thing that maybe you sort of address that and attack with things, then maybe that might be a better way of, you know, getting some progress on the issue that you're struggling with, I suppose.
Yeah, quite often that's not it's not possible in the heat of battle. So if you could just got somebody who's just always right, I mean, and sometimes, I mean, I've learned a lot of I've learned a lot from people who just will not accept that they're wrong. You know, some of the tips and tricks I've learned from them. The art of slanted minuting. Wow. You know, that's like phone them up to say, you know, a thing's okay, and then you get a note back saying, you know, Professor Martin, you said that things were completely unacceptable. Well, no, that's actually not what I said. Have you got any problems? Oh, we can sort it out if you want. No, I didn't say things were completely unacceptable. So dealing with the unreasonable is actually, yeah, you could learn a thing or two from unreasonable, but actually don't let it turn into unpleasant.
Thanks, Jo. I'll take one more question, I think, if that's okay. So thank you, Angela, for this. I find it's almost never colleagues or other people that generate unpleasantness for me. It's the little things, e.g. lack of staff parking, cold office spaces and dodgy IT cause me a lot of irritation. How do you be positive in the face of multiple daily small obstructions like these, especially when they've been ongoing issues for years?
So I would put that in my life-sapping category. So I'm cursed with eternal optimism. Yes, IT issues, you know, you spend 6 hours writing a talk and then PowerPoint or Keynote decides not to save it. And all you want to do is, you know, shout at the dog, really. Yeah, it can get you sometimes a bit of fresh air and a really bad book in the bath. Will help just put things in perspective. But again, you know, some of it is overridden by the fact we're here for the patients, and we do put up with stuff that we shouldn't do. But again, it's not necessarily something to go on the warpath, because everybody wants the IT to be better, including the IT department. And so working to try and make things better, I think that's how I get through it.
Thanks, Jo.
I shrug, have a quiet sort of whimper, and then get back on the horse.
Thank you very much. I think we'll draw tonight's seminar to a close, Jo. Thank you very much again for an excellent presentation and for answering all those questions. And thank you very much to all the audience for being a part of tonight's session and for asking all those questions as well. I'm sorry we didn't get through all of those again. Just to remind you that the videos will be up on the website. So the last 4 weeks are up there now, and this one will be up there shortly as well if you want to go and look at the ones you may have missed or see some of the other ones again. I'd like to thank Jo and also the college team for all their efforts with the seminar series. It's been fantastic so far. And I'd like to welcome you back next week, same time, same place, for Jo's 6th talk, which will be on gossip, raising concerns and whistleblowing. I want to tell you about. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.